Systems engaged. Frequencies synchronized. Prepare for incoming transmission. Coming to you from somewhere in the multiverse, this is Robots from Tomorrow. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and as always your podcatcher of choice. For the full archive featuring over 800 episodes of comics and comics-friendly content like interviews, book discussions, and freeform tomfoolery, please go to robotsfromtomorrow.net. Here is your host, Greg.
Hello everybody, either welcome to the show or welcome back to the show, whichever the case may be. This is, of course, Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg. Thank you for joining me. I hope this episode finds you well as we are starting yet another year, 2026. How is that even possible? I don't know. But new year, new thing we are trying for the first time today, something a little different. This episode includes a commentary discussion about the Justice League Unlimited episode For the Man Who Has Everything. I've got Zach Wilkerson from the DC3 cast with me to not only talk about the episode before and after we comment on it specifically, but also to chat with me about what he's been up to since he was on the show last. That is a fun discussion indeed, but if you just want to get on to the actual commentary part of the episode, no judgment, that's totally cool. You can move ahead to either around 23, 24 minutes into the episode and listen along there, or you can find a special commentary-only version of the episode in the show feed as well. If you're actually listening along with the episode, you may want to go with the special version, as that one doesn't have the JLU audio in the background and might be a less confusing, smoother listening experience. Like I said, this is a new thing we're trying out here, so there probably is still a few kinks to work out. But all in all, I'm really happy with how this episode came together. If you end up agreeing with me and would like to have us do more of these for the show, you can let us know in the usual places where you like, subscribe, rate, and review Robots from Tomorrow, as well as our Blue Sky account, and of course, the RFT mothership over at robotsfromtomorrow.net. Stick around till the end and find out what we've got coming up for the rest of January, or, skip over it and just be surprised when the new chat gets beamed into your device of choice. But for now, let's dive into this chat, taking a look at the Justice League Unlimited episode For the Man Who Has Everything. Zach, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Greg? Good to be back.
I actually didn't do the math on how long it's been, but it's been...
Would say like probably pre-COVID, I would think. I'm trying to remember what the last episode that we did was, what we talked about. I really don't remember. It's been so long.
Yeah.
I think we've even had you on the DC3 more recently than I've been on Robots from Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's been weird because I've had Brian on for various things. Obviously, Vince has done the greatest Batman stories and the greatest Superman stories that were told, where we actually... That'll come to play in a minute. For us, the scheduling just sort of hadn't worked out for this or that. And I'm like, you know what? If somebody were to nobody pays attention, but if somebody were to actually pay attention, you're like, you talk about the DC3, but really, in terms of your guests and stuff, it's really the DC2. And I was like, no, that's not the case.
Since I've been on, I've had 2 kids.
Yeah.
I am much greedier and with my time.
As you should be. As you should be, which is actually another thing I was going to bring up. So I'm not really sure why I'm being coy about what episode we're going to be talking about, because of course it'll be in the show title or whatever. But we're going to be talking about the second episode from Justice League Unlimited's first season, an adaptation of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons for The Man Who Has Everything. A while back, I talked with Vince about the original comic in some depth for part 3 of our Greatest Bronze Age Superman Stories series, which you can find in our episode feed or at robotsfromtomorrow.net. Now I'm going to talk to Zach about what I consider to be a perfect adaptation of this story. Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about your show, the DC3 cast. 10 years, over 500 episodes. What do you think 2015 Zach would say if somebody handed him an episode list of all 500 episodes and said, here's what you have to look forward to?
He would probably be really excited about all of the comics and things that we were getting to talk about, and would not be nearly as jaded as 2025 Zach is about all the comics that we have read and discussed. Because 2015 was like right before Rebirth when we began the whole project. I still remember to this day watching the Rebirth announcement live stream and furiously texting with Vince and Brian about all the new things that were being announced. And just so bright-eyed and full of hope, and just how many ups and downs there have been since that time. But just the fact, finally getting to do the Grant Morrison read through, which was like an all-time dream for the show. I think if 2015 Zach knew that we were doing that, he would be over the moon at the idea of it. So,
yeah. My next question was going to be, are there any topics out of that 10 years that you're particularly proud of? Obviously, the Morrison thing. Are there any others that stand out that you're like, man, I'm really glad we were able to do X, Y, or Z?
So I really did there was a period of time where we did our crisis management project, which I think actually you were on maybe for an episode of. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was. Maybe you'd remember.
It was I lucked out. I got the final night. Sort of like non-event event.
Yeah,
thing.
Final Night is so cool. Final Night is so cool. I remember that was one of the first pickups I got when I was dipping into digital comics. Comixology was becoming a thing. That was the first time I was able to access Final Night. Being a big Hal Jordan mark at that time, I was extremely excited to check that out. But yeah, the crisis management project was really fun. To this day, I think Brian regrets that we never saw that through to completion. I don't remember exactly what happened there. I think it was because it coincided with the relaunch into whatever, I think that would have been New Frontier, the publishing imprint, and we kind of ended crisis management to go into New Frontier. But that was an extremely fun project. Honestly, more so again, I'm not just trying to pitch our Patreon, but some of the side projects that we've done on there, both the Christberg episodes with Brian and the kind of goofier, I think every episode I've done, just me and Vince, has been Taylor Swift oriented. But those fun side projects have been a big delight. So yeah. In general, aside from the New 52 read through that kicked off the Patreon, I've really enjoyed everything that we've done on there.
When I talk with Brian, when I talk with Vince, we always plug the Patreon because it is a steal at $5 a month.
I feel we have fun in the Discord. I'm so happy for everyone who hangs out and the community that we've built and the conversations that happen there, the goofs and everything. It's really fun. There aren't a lot of online spaces that I enjoy being in these days, but that's definitely one of them for sure.
It is a very safe and welcoming space to talk about all manner of things, including you guys doing the Starman read through.
Oh, yeah. Finally reading Starman was like an incredible experience because I read, I think, early 2010s when DC started releasing those normal trim size omnibuy, the 6 hardcovers. I was in college then. I picked up at least the first 2 and read through those and really enjoyed it, but they were coming out at such a clip and I was on, shoestring college budget. I ended up not picking up the rest. And then the latter volumes were such low print runs and I just never picked them up. The trade paperback collections got canceled and it was kind of just a hot mess. And I thought, when am I ever going to read Starman, the series that I know I would like and that Brian, holds on the highest of pedestals. And so to finally read that and not only get to read it, but for it to then become, honestly, maybe my favorite DC comic I've ever read was really, really fun. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, being able to do such a deep dive into it and breaking it up the way that you did, so you're able to give it the breadth that it deserves. I mean, I thought your Animal Man was like maybe some of the best stuff it is still like some of the best stuff you've ever done. And then you did Starman, and I'm like, oh, that is really good. And just the fact that you and Vince enjoyed it as much in your own ways as Brian does, to have I think to see him be like, man, this is really important to me. I think you guys are going to like it. And then to have that actually work out, just like, oh yeah. In addition to it being such a wonderful examination of all those comics, an examination of everything those comics do, which is a lot, just in terms of like watching the show, listening to the show, to be able to have that happen was just sort of Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So,
Watching the show one day, we can never get Vince on camera. If we ever do it, he'll just be hiding behind a pillar while he records. But yeah, it is funny. Brian always hates the things that we get him to read, but of course we would love the thing that he picks out.
yeah. So you guys have been doing this 10 years. Do you have any particular, let's say, insight, or looking back on it, you're like, X was a really good decision in order to keep us still not only doing it for 10 years, but anything in particular, you're like, oh, that was smart?
Yeah,
You know?
so it was a very big point of contention. I think we've undergone so many evolutions and format shifts over the years, but getting started in our heyday, we were reading almost everything each week. That I think was unsustainable, and kind of moving to a model where we're much pickier about what we're reading and discussing has been a lot healthier for the continued existence of the podcast and also our mental health. And I think the format we've settled on now, where we have a lot of different topics and formats and things that we're doing, and focusing a lot more on older comics rather than current comics too, has been, I don't think any of us are necessarily doing this to chase any kind of particular listenership or to get any kind of attention. This project has always been an avenue for the three of us to hang out and invite others to just, to just have fun in this space that brought us together, the comic space. And I think that decision to move away from trying to cover everything and also focusing exclusively on current comics has been the big and most important shift.
Yeah, sustainability is obviously the name of the game. And as somebody who clearly does not chase any particular audience at all, I feel seen when you're like, we're just doing this so we can talk about the comics we want to talk about. I'm like, oh man, that's so good. So 10 years you've been DC3ing, because that's now a verb. Actually, one other thing in terms of starting off of reading everything and then whittling things down, I remember you were mentioned as a verb, like to Wilkerson something was just like, no, I'm done. You're like, maybe I'll just figure out. You're like, nope, dead to me.
I've always been the biggest curmudgeon on the show, much to like Brian's chagrin. We often butt heads about, I'm constantly the voice of, why are we doing this particular thing? Is this something we really want to be doing? Is this something we feel like we have to be doing? And especially as we have gotten older and we have had more responsibilities through the progression of life, I have generally been the one to be like, do we need this, or can we be okay without this? I think there's a version of the podcast where we continue to do more things, but for me personally, it just was not sustainable or something I wanted to be doing with my time. I think in my comics reading journey, I have really, especially over the last few years, tried to just kind of focus on the things that really resonate with me and that I really want to be seeking out. And that comes down to even like my pull list, things that I'm still buying, of just like, because it's kind of baked into the hobby of the completionist and the collectionist aspect of it, and just buying and engaging with things for the sake of buying and engaging, and not necessarily because of what you get out of it or how it really resonates with you. And just trying to be more intentional about the things that I engage with has been a big part of continuing to engage with comics, I think, especially over the last 3 to 4 years.
Like getting off the merry-go-round and realizing you don't need to engage with everything to engage with those things is it's an important step in the life of every comic book fan, to be like, oh wait, I can step away and then come back. I don't have to. And I think, interestingly enough, for us, having multiversity as a avenue to be able to engage with, but engage with in a way that kind of not demanded a certain thing, but it framed that in a certain way. Having multiversity no longer be a part of that it feels interesting, almost like the engine that drove so much of our engagement with comics to a level that it wouldn't have been if it were just us as fans But to have now Multiversity not there and have us be like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, what do I do? I just read comics and then not. I don't know how. I don't know how to just like read.
Well,
comics.
that's a really fascinating. Yeah, that's a great. And I think about that all the time. With Multiversity. So I came on to Multiversity, I guess, in 2012 on the review crew, and that really shaped the way I engaged with comics for a while. But then once I got plugged into the DC3, it was around that time that I stopped doing the weekly review grind. And you would still do things for the site, but from that point on, aside from Brian ribbing me to do a year in review thing every year, I often wasn't engaging with the site in any way outside of the podcast. And so in that way, when Multiversity ended, it really didn't change the way that I engaged with comics that much. But I do often think about how I would be engaging with comics right now had it not been for Multiversity, had it not been for the DC3 cast, because not only has that shaped the comics and the things that I engage with, it's also shaped the way that I get comics, because I am fortunate to get a lot of review copies and access to the digital comic services, and the way that shapes my engagement and being able to read more things, and also just the way that the comics medium has evolved with everything being accessible at your fingertips with DC Infinite and Marvel Unlimited and all of the manga services and things. We've never had easier access to comics and more to read and the things that we can choose to read, but also sometimes that excessive choice is paralyzing, and sometimes I never know. And anyone who's ever listened to the DC3 knows I'm the most volatile in terms of what I'm interested in at any given moment. I will be on a kick where I want to read all of Batman, and don't tell Vince and Brian that project is kind of stalled a little bit. They took bets on how long I would make it. Officially, it's still going. I haven't given up yet. But yeah, it is just wild. I've talked on the DC3 before about how influential Multiversity was on me, just even as a person, in terms of the people I met and the way interacting with you and Vince and Brian and Walt and Emily and August and so many other people who have kind of influenced and changed my perspective and my worldview and the way that I think about life in general. And it's crazy to think how much me just seeing Matt Malikoff post a call for reviewers on Twitter one day would have such a profound influence on my life.
Yeah. Multiversity changed my life. It absolutely changed my life. And we were already, Mike and I were doing a different show. Mike met Brian at a show and was like, we can get in with these Multiversity guys. We moved our original show, the next issue, over to Multiversity. But then we started doing the 2000 AD column, the Multiversity one. That supercharged at least our involvement in it, because not only are we doing the podcast, we're also doing this weekly crazy review column. And yeah, my Multiversity, all because of X-Men Origins Wolverine. I try to think of what my life would be without that. Mike and I wouldn't have done Robots. We wouldn't have had the support of Multiversity, the platform of Multiversity, everybody that we, engage with behind the scenes. Literally changed my life. Thinking about life-changing things, you've been doing DC3 for 10 years. You became a father somewhere in that. Have you noticed the fact that changing how you react to certain things in comics that you read?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm way more of a sucker. I was already an emotional engager of media, but now even more so. Things resonate with me in different ways. I don't think Animal Man that you mentioned before would have hit the same way for me. Because I had never read that either. That was one of my big Morrison holes in my reading of their bibliography, and reading that as a parent hit so much harder, and I felt it so much more. And I often think about things when I'm reading. It's like, oh, this is something I would love to share with my kids one day, or this is something I hope they never have to read.
Yeah. Have you reread stuff that you read before you became a dad that you've reacted specifically different to?
Yeah, interestingly, so I actually just reread Day Tripper for the first time
Okay.
in over a decade. That was an interesting read, just both transitioning into parenthood, but also, that's such a book that's about stages of life and just having entered another stage of life, essentially, when engaging it's one thing engaging that book when I was a young 20 something and then touching on it again in my mid 30s and seeing how life had changed and evolved. That was a really interesting experience. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I've read that otherwise just specifically tied to parenthood. There's so many things that I have revisited and things that I maybe fell in love with in my early comics fandom that I'm just like, wow, why did I like that so much? What resonated with me so much when I read that?
I bring it up specifically because there is a parenting aspect for the man who has everything that, I mean, I'm not a parent, but it hits me differently reading it now versus when I read it when I first got it, which I was 10 years old. I'm interested to hear if like that part hit you or will hit you,
so it's
differently.
funny. I think I actually read For the Man Who Had His Everything for the first time, at least the first time that I am conscious of. When we did it for the DC3 cast, Alan Moore, I think it's collected in that Alan Moore DC Universe collection.
Yep.
And we read it for that. And I may have read it prior to that, but I had memory holded enough that was essentially my first reading. I've kind of read it later in life, I think, then. You reading it at 10 years old is way different than me reading it in my 30s, for sure. Yeah. So, and also to the point of this episode that we're about to watch, I may have seen this in my youth. I definitely engaged with a lot of the Timverse stuff as a kid. Batman, the animated series, was my gateway into all of this, I would say. Yeah. Watching that as like a 5-6-year-old, and then the Superman animated series that came after that was really my Batman was one thing, but that Superman series was really opened the door to the whole DC universe. But then by the time that Justice League rolled around, and then absolutely JLU, I was kind of reaching the age where I didn't really engage with cartoons as much anymore. So that was kind of a point where I maybe didn't. I say that in like I wasn't also watching a ton of anime. I don't know why, but my interest in that area waned around that time. So JL and JLU is a bit of a pull for me there. But there is a good chance that I've seen this at some point and just don't remember it. Yeah.
I mean, any combination of that, it doesn't matter because this is a fantastic episode. I would say it is a perfect adaptation of the original story. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is the difference between adaptation versus recreation, right? Because some of this is literally word for word from the original comic, and other parts are clearly not, as you will see. So this is going to be interesting. You did not watch this beforehand for the very, very clever and very good reason of like wanting to have like first impressions and stuff for it, which is great. So whether you're watching it on DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, or whatever, get it to the beginning of the episode. We are starting right from the fade in to Bugs Bunny leaning against the Warner Brothers shield with the carrot. I'm going to give a countdown, and we are going to press play and go from there. Zach, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1, pressing play. Here we go.
And there we are.
Best commentary ever.
Yeah.
No, it's gonna be great. So this was actually Dwayne McDuffie's idea to do this adaptation. The adaptation was done by J.M. DeMatteis, who had not read the comic beforehand. He just was like, okay, I'll just do this thing.
That's
And
wild for such a big name comic writer to have not read one of the biggest words from arguably the biggest name comics writer. That's wild.
Yeah. But I listened to an interview and he was like, no, he just worked like from the material and just went from there. So one of the big things about this is, of course, it's the original comic had Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. This has Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, but it also is the DC animated versions of these characters, obviously. So the Superman that we see here, the Krypton that he refers back to, is much different in the episode versus the comic. And I think the episode does a really good job of maintaining the spirit of the comic, but using the material of their continuity to give you an emotionally resonant version. So we have seen Superman with the Black Mercy already installed. We are now on the very iconographic whatever intro. Yeah, I just talked right on over that, but
yeah, this is just
it's good stuff.
it's so I just cannot believe that to this day I can't believe that this existed on television, or arguably one of the best adaptations of the DC universe, even though I haven't seen a lot of this. I just know from its pedigree, and it's wild that it evolved to this point, that you had a DC series on television that had such deep cuts in it. Just even seeing from the silhouettes in the beginning, there was still Aztec of all people. It's just it's crazy.
So this is, I think, the only piece of adaptation that Alan Moore allowed his name to be on. Because Bruce Timm ran it by him before they did it. He gave his blessing, and he watched the episode, and he's like, yeah, that's really good. So it says, from the story by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and not the original writer and Dave Gibbons, or just Dave Gibbons.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about me only doing audio commentaries for adaptations of Alan Moore comics, but I'm 2 for 2 now.
Yeah. So we are now in his Black Mercy dream, and he is a farmer, which is interesting. In the original comic, he was a scientist, a geologist, and we'll see, obviously, the lady that he is married to, laying next to, is not Lana, is not Lois. It is Loana, but voiced by Dana Delaney, who, of course, was the voice of Lois in the original series. Superman here, of course, is voiced by George Newbern, who is the Superman of the Justice League, I almost said United, of the Justice League animated verse, taking over from Tim Daly, who was in the Superman animated series. One of the big things here is, of course, they are working from a Superman who considers himself to have grown up in Kansas, right? Like, he's the farmer, he's the farm boy. So his perfect thing would be, much more of an agricultural type of background, very sort of post-crisis versus pre-crisis understanding of the situation. So now we're back. I guess one of the biggest things is that the original comic had Jason Todd in it. And here there is no Jason Todd. And I think that's a really interesting decision. I think there are a lot of things that can go into it. But we now have Mongol showing up, voiced by Eric Roberts.
You recognize me. I'm flattered. I suppose Superman told you all about our previous encounter.
You mean how he humiliated you?
A jaundiced account.
jaundiced account.
Yeah,
Oh my
because
gosh.
in this continuity, we had already seen Mongol. We'd seen the Justice League go to Warworld and basically kick his ass. So Batman is like, "Oh, you," and he's like,
Yeah.
jaundiced account of whatever."
To my knowledge, Jason Todd was never in the in this continuity, correct?
Correct. Correct. But he is in the original comic, and maybe his best. Alan Moore gives him he kind of saves the day in the original book. But here we get to see Mongol. I think Eric Roberts does a fantastic job as sleazy Darkseid, which is what I almost said Thanos is what Mongol. You have Darkseid, and then you have Thanos, who was a ripoff of Darkseid, and then you have Mongol, who was a ripoff of Thanos and Darkseid. So
Garbage fawning at his feet. More honest, don't you think, than this pretense of being a selfless hero?
you get this menacing alien that Wonder Woman just tried to beat up, and he just is chuckling that off.
He was the only obstacle in my way. The rest of you are already dead.
But vocally, like, you want evil menace, you go with Michael Ironside. Michael Ironside did Darkseid. So they're like, who else can we get who's not trying to compete with that? And Eric Roberts does a fantastic job in this episode.
Brainiac, could you clean up that?
Does Brainiac look like Herbie?
Yeah, big time. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if that's an influence there.
Yeah, it had to be. This does, I like these are Kryptonian clothes, a Krypton influenced by something you guys just read, Man of Steel, right? The John Byrne.
Yeah, this John Byrne, the John Byrne Krypton aesthetic, but like by way of the Timverse style, which
So good.
it is really good. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is extremely iconic. I think the Byrne additions to like the visual language of Superman is like up there with the original Superman movie. I think those are like the two biggest modern additions to the Superman aesthetic. Arguably.
We're getting some family stuff here, which is good. We don't really get that in the comic.
Candor, I forgot.
I don't want a surprise party.
It's just a small one.
But this is a different Clark that we're seeing, and it also sets up when we're setting up his bliss now, so that when it gets ripped away, it helps justify how absolutely pissed off he gets when he's finally freed from this. Bruce trying to nope, and no.
So at this point in JLU, are Clark and Lois an item? Does she know about his identity? Is that like part of the character at this point?
No, I think their kind of relationship is later in, I think it's like season 2 or later in season 1. So they're never like an item, but like they never. It hasn't come to that. I think this is sort of the very beginning, like, of that type of.
Okay, so yeah, it makes sense that in his perfect world he would have that kind of relationship, I guess. To be highlighting that.
Yeah, but yeah, married life. He is having sort of the best day, but we start to see the ground beneath him is shaking. So you get earthquakes and stuff, and it's this sort of growing motif that comes through in the episode and in his interactions. This growing unease. So this scene, she gets thrown into the weapons room. His dialogue right here is directly out of the episode, or is out of the comic. The design of the neural disruptor, whatever that she's aiming at him, that is a Dave Gibbons design. This is very spot on with what happened.
It's more of a woman's weapon.
Go to.
even her like go to hell. And of course, standards of practice, you can't actually say that. The beam comes in to cut her off, but you see her mouth moving. So you're like, if you wanted to be like super particular about that, it's like she said it. And Batman is not able to save Superman. So he's trying to get Superman to wake up. Superman is trying internally, but now we see that Superman is visiting his father because, of course, Krypton did not blow up. So that means Jor-El is still there. His father, voiced by Christopher McDonald, Shooter McGavin himself, who also played Jor-El in the original Superman animated series, Last Son of Krypton opener, whatever. So a nice bit of carry through casting there. Let's see. Yeah, so I think in terms of not having, so all of this stuff, Wonder Woman fighting Mongol, she did that in the original. I think the not having Jason Todd or not having Robin does a couple of things. It helps streamline the episode. It's one less character you have to account for and explain. It gives Wonder Woman more to do, right? Mm-hmm. It gives her more agency. It doesn't diffuse not that the comic diffuses, but certainly in something that's being shown to children, right? It pushes her a little further to the foreground of representation, of having her be not only more in the episode, but she's going toe to toe with somebody who Superman has a problem with, right? Like she's being shown to have agency and just as much of the Trinity as the other two. Mm-hmm. So it was I think it's a good decision, and in a way that works for this particular setting, right? These are the toys that they have to play with in order to sort of build this adaptation. And they're like, well, we can't just sort of shoehorn in this new character to have to do all this stuff. What do we have? How can we make what we have work for trying to tell this story in a new medium or in a different medium?
Yeah, because it's certainly a choice, because it would have been very easy to just throw in like a Tim Drake or another Robin to try to match the story. But I agree with your point about it streamlining it and make already you're adapting it into just a 20-minute episode. So I think focusing on the Trinity makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so this section right here, that's it. So this is where we've gotten to the point Superman has already decided that this isn't real. He's talking to Van, his son. This is all directly from the dialogue is directly from the comic, but George Newbern sells this. Oh, it's so good. I'm glad I don't have the sound up, because I always get a little choked up when I see this, because it's so good. Yeah. But we are 14 minutes into the episode, sort of 2/3.
It is flying. You're very much right. Flying. Yeah, like.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're real. I don't think any of this is real.
Don't say that, Daddy. Please, you're scaring me.
No, I don't want to scare you, Van. You are everything I ever wanted in a son. This is everything I ever wanted in a life. But I've got responsibilities, Van. And I have to go now.
But this moment, they gave you just enough. Like, okay, we see he's got a kid. We have domestic moment to sort of sell this, to help sell this. We see him in like 2 or 3 little scenes, and then we see Krypton, his world literally falling apart in front of him as he kisses Van's head, and the kid is just, oh man. And then he hugs him again.
I promise you, I'll never forget.
Yeah. And of course the music is swelling, which can't hear, thankfully. Big explosion. Krypton blows up again. Batman takes the Black Mercy onto himself, and we get to see his best day, which you're like him and his folks leaving a theater. Joe Chill. How is this the best day?
We'll start with the pretty pearls around the lady's neck.
Not the pearls.
Oh, it's always the pearls. The pearls falling.
What?
It's always the pearls falling.
Not always.
Not now.
Because
Oh, that
Yeah.
smile. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Yeah. And that wasn't, did we see? I don't know. Ah, shoot. I don't know if that was, if we actually had visual for that in the comic. Anyway.
In the original, yeah.
Yeah. So Superman is now awake. He is super pissed. And he is looking to, he's looking to just beat the living hell out of Mongol.
Do you have any idea what you did to me?
So this is choreographed beat for beat the way that the comic is. The comic obviously also gives us captions around this, so Moore is able to sort of describe what's going on kind of in the alien zoo that they're having this fight in. But I mean, you look at Clark is pissed. In some ways, even just as much when he finally fights, or I guess by this time he's already done it, Darkseid, after Darkseid killed Dan Turpin. Whatever. So this is really, but yeah, this tearing off your own arm, that's all more. And now we have sort of the commercial break there. Wonder Woman still fighting, going over to Batman as Superman is not really holding his own all that much around Mongol. Yeah, we get the famous burn line here.
Happy birthday, Kryptonian. I give you oblivion.
Burn!
Oh, so we've got Wonder Woman makes her way over to Bruce, who of course is not going to be able to free himself either physically, maybe mentally, but like not physically from this actual from the Black Mercy vampirically stuck to his chest. And I wonder how much of that is like a mental thing versus physical. Anyway, Wonder Woman, we needed Wonder Woman's strength to be able to save Bruce here, but of course Bruce's world going from the best day. If we look back in the shadow, and Bruce is free, but at a cost. And no pearls. Thankfully, no pearls.
No pearls, yeah.
No pearls, but yeah. So,
You should have stayed in whatever happy fantasy
yeah, again,
granted you.
DeMatteis is like, I don't need to rewrite the dialogue. This is pretty pitch perfect, paced perfectly. And just look at how, man, Clark is pissed in a way that we just never get to see him.
We don't, yeah. Well, it's so interesting about Clark's thing is that he saves everyone, and even though none of that was real, it is almost as if he kind of like lost Krypton again, and even more so.
Yeah. There's the, the losing, the planet, but also the personal,
Right.
part of it, right? Which, you know, and everyone's like, well, Superman's too powerful. Nobody can hurt him. I was like, you watch this episode, right? You go for the heart. That's how you get Superman. And we just saw Wonder Woman throwing the Black Mercy that she picked off of Batman onto Mongol, taking out him. And what you're not going to be able to hear now is that this episode is going to end on a fade or a zoom in on Mongol. You're going to be able to hear very briefly or very low, like screams and pain and whatever, which is a really good way of being able to suggest the ending of the actual comic, which is an entire page of Dave Gibbons stuff that shows us what Mongol's perfect day is, which is him ruling the galaxy and sitting on a throne and having a throne that's like a throne of skulls and, you know, all of that stuff, which is, you know, what his thing was. Of course, standards and practice is to be like, hell no. They're like, okay, well, how about we just put this thing in low in the mix behind the thing, and they got away with it. So that's the episode. Unfortunately, I talked over most of it while you were trying to watch it.
No, it was good. It was all good. I enjoyed some of the insight that you were able to give that I wouldn't have otherwise, and yet kept up with it perfectly fine as we went. You know, it's just so interesting to me. Obviously, JLU was a continuation of Justice League, so, you know, it's not necessarily a new show per se, but just to drop that in as a single episode in a first season is wild, especially because two-parters were not unheard of, and in these shows, it is kind of interesting. I could see the temptation to maybe stretch it out to 2 episodes and leave like a little bit of a cliffhanger of him in the dream world, and the cliffhanger being him beginning to question, you know what I mean? And then to let the climax actually happen in a part 2. It's interesting to me that they chose not to do that, just to wrap it all in one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because like you said, Justice League was 2-part episodes. So you could have done the 44-minute version of this. You know, would they have put in Robin if you have another 20 minutes to play around with? And you'd be able to show more of Krypton. The comic is particularly bleak about Krypton. The Krypton you see in the episode is great, but it's going to blow up, and that's personally sad for Clark, as it should be. It's his thing. In the comic, this is a Krypton that should have blown up. Jor-El was wrong about the planet blowing up, and now, after 25 years, he was disgraced because everyone thought he was a lunatic. So now he basically went MAGA, right?
Right, yeah.
That scene of he's leading this rally in front of this clash between protesters and the Kryptonian cops, and they're like swords, and all this shit is going on, and it is dark, which you were not going to get away with. You know, I mean, you'd have to do like a Black Label animation type of thing to really
like one of those, like the direct to home video type movies that would evolve out of this would be the appropriate ground for something like that, geared more towards teenage kids.
So getting back to the original adaptation versus recreation, I feel like that would have been more of a recreation. Like, how can we quote unquote adapt the story and just literally copy it and put it onto moving medium? But I feel like this episode, when I say it does the perfect adaptation, it takes everything the original tried to do, and it does it with different tools without sacrificing anything at the core of the original idea, but it goes in a different direction. And just wanted to get back to the Jason Todd thing for a second. One of the things I thought about in the original comics, so you have, for Batman and Superman, you both have them with their sons, right? And although Superman loses his son, it is Batman's son, Ward, whatever, who really saves the day, right? And that I felt was really interesting.
I think it is interesting without Jason. Bruce gets kind of short shift in this adaptation a little bit because, you know, aside from the minute that you kind of spend with him in his own Black Mercy world, and even that, you know, it's kind of, his presence is the least important in a way. You know, obviously he's the one who frees Clark, but it's mostly viewed as a Superman story, rightfully so. Wonder Woman is elevated by the absence of Jason, like you mentioned, but I think Bruce's part in the story is kind of downgraded a little bit. Even his little scene in Crime Alley feels superfluous in the way the adaptation handles everything. So,
but it is superfluous in terms of necessary for the plot. But I think their version is more, because I have the comic in front of me. It intercuts with the Waynes leaving the theater. Joe Chill comes up, Thomas Wayne attacks, and then Joe Chill being carried off in chains from the cops. So it doesn't have the to be like nitpicking, but it doesn't have the emotional impact of what we just saw, which is unfair because, of course, the episode has the audio and the slow motion and the moving and being able to direct you to where you need to see the kid's face and everything. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I can't remember if I said this before. It's interesting to use this as a compare and contrast to how much space you don't have, even in animation, versus like what you have in a comic versus a book versus a movie versus whatever. I mean, this was a 40-page comic, and you're like, well, it can be one episode. You're like, yeah, half of that can be an episode, maybe. And they did it, and I think it was really successful.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a tendency to overextend comic stories and adaptations in other mediums. And generally, in like my opinion, animation is the easiest jump from comic to another medium. Animation makes the most sense because it is like just setting art into motion. You don't lose as much as you do transitioning into live action. But even still, yeah, like the brevity on this is, I typically value brevity, but I could have even used a little more, I think, in Krypton. But like you said, there's so much that couldn't make it in from the comic, you know, the kind of the political and kind of some of the darker aspects. And so I think really choosing to focus on the relationship between Kal-El and Van-El and making that the crux of that emotional climax was really smart.
This is a really wonderful adaptation in that it took all the important points and said, how do we maintain these? How do we get this as much of the, I would say juice, but like as much of the juice of the story as we can into whatever size container we have to be able to pour it into, to be able to do this episode. And man, it's good. It's really, really good. That's just my opinion, but I mean, it's good. It's really good, really good. Anything else you have that you want to for this, or any DC3 stuff, or
I'm trying to think. It is really interesting how it also does kind of work. Obviously, I had some questions about what is the, I guess, like status quo of this version of these characters in terms of how it relates to, you know, and maybe like interpreting the story, but it really doesn't matter. It does work as a standalone thing, just in the same way that the original For the Man Who Has Everything story works as a standalone story. I think you can show this to anyone who has just the most basic understanding of these three characters. You can get it. It's a very primal, foundational type of story. I think personally, after seeing this, I feel like my inclination would be like, oh, well, I would want to recommend the comic to somebody. But I actually think this might be more friendly. You want a really good story about the Trinity? Here it is. You know, this kind of gets to the heart of it really quickly. So it stands on its own rights. I kind of think my initial inclination is just always to say,
read the comic.
The comic is better. Yeah, read the comic. But there are definitely merits to this that the comic doesn't have. So
yeah. It's not better. It's different. And I love the comic. Don't get me wrong. The comic, in terms of comic booking, in terms of the craft of it, Gibbons, oh man, it's so good. It's so good. There is a book, I think Avatar put it out in its most recent printing. That's essentially Alan Moore Guide to Writing Comics. He does a case study of one of his works, which is the Superman Annual 11 that this comes from. So he actually gives essentially a writer's commentary of how he came up with the idea, decided it needed a cut and back and forth, and how I wanted to do this, and the thing of why to use this character and all that stuff. If anybody is interested in diving in a little more about this, no pun intended, I would highly recommend that. I think it's still in print. Definitely worth checking out. The comic is so good. And I'm thrilled that the episode is up on HBO Max, HBO Go, whatever you want to call
whatever they want to call it.
Yeah,
currently,
whatever they want to call it. Yeah. The episode is relatively
Netflix
easy.
next year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So hopefully it'll be easy for people to find because it's less than 30 minutes. It's 22 minutes, 22:05 with credits and your intro. It is a literal bite-size bit of entertainment that really works. What do you guys have coming up DC3 wise?
On the main show, we're going to continue to be, trying to touch in with some current DC comics. I think we're looking at maybe checking out the new Greg Rucka and Nicola Scott series, the Cheetah and Cheshire Rob the Justice League, I think it's called, which just wrapped recently. And we are kind of dipping our toes into the DCAO event. I think we're going to be revisiting that. We just got done doing kind of a road to KO review, and we'll be looking at the crossover proper once it wraps up. Continuing our post-crisis read-through, we're going to be reading the first bit of the question series that launched after Crisis and continuing on that project. And then on the Patreon side, we're getting into the Morrison Renaissance at DC when they returned after the brief sojourn to Marvel. We've already covered Seven Soldiers, which was the beginning of that, but now we're getting to, I think, the thing that people most associate with the return of Morrison to DC, which is All-Star Superman. So we're about to get to that, and it'll be my first time rereading that in several years. I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, that era of Morrison at DC is really special to me, and I'm very excited to basically from like 05 to the New 52 is, I think, some of my all-time favorite stuff. Really excited about that.
Did you already do 52 for your crisis management?
Yeah, we did, but I think we were going to do it again in some capacity. There has been some discussion about that, but we're going to be tackling it a little bit differently. I don't think we're going to be going as in depth with it as we did for crisis management. I think we're really going to be trying to view it through the Morrisonian lens and focus on the things that we think that they were doing, maybe like trying to look to some outside sources to get some more insight. I think a lot of it is pretty well known what parts they were focusing on. The thing I'm most excited about now, having read Animal Man, is to really hone in on those Animal Man sections and view it as almost a pseudo sequel to Animal Man and see how it works in that way. Because this will be my first time rereading it since we did it for crisis management. So that'll be interesting for sure.
You guys just, I don't know if you did it. I just heard the Superman 2000 episode.
We did that a little while back, and that was so much fun. That was something that we had talked about wanting to do for a while, well before the Morrison project started. And man, what a fascinating little piece of comics history to learn about, and just to imagine what could have been and trace the lineage of those ideas through the different creators who were involved and the things that they would go on to do. I feel like it's rare to get such a open peek behind the curtain of what could have been. Usually creators are so coy about those types of projects, but to have the whole project Bible laid bare to engage with is really interesting.
Yeah, I was just listening to it talking about 52, Morrison and Wade. And back then it would have been Miller and Pyre. And then for 52, it would have been Rucka and Johns. And like, just it wouldn't have worked before. It barely worked. I mean, it worked really well, but like from a production standpoint, it barely worked for 52. And thankfully it did, because we got 52. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, especially when you think about the small amount of time between those two projects. That was very late 90s. So
6-7 years, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Which, looking back on it, feels minuscule, to think that Superman 2000 project would be kiboshed. And then so soon after, we essentially get, in spirit, a similar kind of idea happening. The way comics shifted so much, the crux of why that project didn't happen is because of the policy of not having, air quotes, big name creators on Superman and Batman. And how
blink of an eye later.
Blink of an eye later, you had Jim Lee on Batman with
Jeff Loeb.
with Jeff Loeb. And and how kind of the paradigm in comics shifted so quickly from the late 90s into the early 2000s when it became so writer driven, the Bendises and the Joneses, and it's just really weird.
Time is not only a flat circle, it's just weird because you're looking at that and you're like, okay, well, that was 6 or 7 years ago. That would have been 2/3 of the DC3 cast so far.
Yeah, 6-7 years ago from now, we were in the middle of Rebirth.
As people get older, obviously everybody sort of goes through this and you look back and you're like, wow, that seemed like so long when you're going through it, but now you're just like, no, that was a blink of an eye. So
right.
It's
longer than the whole New 52,
Yeah. So alrighty, well, I think we'll sort of wrap it up there. Zach, thank you so much for doing this, for indulging me in this weird little thing. But I was like, hey, we can go ahead and give this a shot. How do I actually end these things? Oh, so where people can find the DC3 cast, obviously, what's the URL?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, people can Google. Like it's DC3cast or Patreon.
At patreon.com/DC3cast would be that. I don't think we have any active socials anymore, just with the way of the world and the way things have gone. We had a Twitter account, but that is defunct with all of the X stuff. You can't find us on Multiversity anymore. So now the Patreon is the main way. But of course, our main show is on any podcast app of choice. Just search DC3 Cast. You'll find us for our main show discussions, which are check-ins with current DC Comics, our post-crisis read-through, and then of course we talk about news, solicits, things like that on a regular basis.
That's a lot. That is a lot. That's a lot of content. I am envious. So that, as they say, is that. Again, if you want to hear more of these type of episodes, don't be shy about it. Let us know in the comments or the emails or the skeets or the tubes or whatever method you have available to you. You can do that while you are liking, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show. Because, of course, that helps more people find out about episodes like this and the other stuff we have going on in our little slice of the multiverse, and it would warm our little robot hearts ever so much if you would be so kind as to do so. In 2 weeks, on January 22nd, we have another DC3 caster back on the show. This time, it's Vince Ostrowski picking up where we left off with part 2 of our 3-part look at the greatest Batman stories of the Bronze Age. And then, finally, on February 5th, we bring you the already teased and mentioned look at the first 4 issues of Classic X-Men and how writer Chris Claremont got a second chance to make a first impression for his legendary run on Marvel's Mutants. We hope you come back for those and many more episodes. So, until then, my name is Greg. Please, stay safe, keep enjoying those funny books, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Systems disengaged.